What does it take to thrive as a woman in business? You're going to love my conversation with Angela Guice on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi there, and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. Thank you so much for joining me today. We have a tour de force conversation all about being an entrepreneur as a woman, whether it's in a very male-dominated, hard to get into industry like Hollywood, all the way through to how to navigate changes in the economy, especially unexpected ones, whether it's the current economy, back when the pandemic started and all the way back to 12, 14 years ago from the Great Recession. So my guest today is Angela Guice, who is the founder of a Los Angeles-based production company called NUCONTEXT. She has been in Hollywood for over 20 years, and she has worked with clients like the Walt Disney Company, Netflix, Hulu, BET, NBCUniversal, DreamWorks, and more. She's an Emmy-award-winning executive producer, and she has a list of clients and people that she's worked with that you would definitely recognize, including ones like Amy Schumer and Lizzo. So fun. Angela and I have been working together on her signature talk, on her keynote over the past few months. And it's really about this idea of personal branding and how much that personal branding sets you apart. And definitely, Angela has experienced that out in Hollywood, but applies to you too. Angela, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Carol.
All right, well, let's start with all the way back to when you decided to move to Los Angeles and have a career in the Hollywood industry. Tell us about that. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? And then why did you decide that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I am from Biloxi, Mississippi, a very small town on the Gulf Coast. And my parents actually own an advertising agency. So I grew up since birth, basically, in the marketing and advertising business. So it was a natural for me to kind of take that step. But moving to Hollywood certainly was. But I always dreamed of being like Sherry Lansing one day, who is the president of Paramount. And I didn't end up quite going into the movie industry, but I did end up back where my parents started, which is in the advertising business. So what we do at NUCONTEXT, we promote television shows, movies. We're basically an advertising agency for television networks and streaming services. It's a very interesting niche where I landed, but it's awesome because it takes the two things that I love, advertising, marketing, branding, and combines it with the entertainment industry. So it's been a really amazing career so far. We worked with a lot of interesting people. And I do feel like my Southern roots really have informed the way I run my company, the way I promote my personal brand, and just the overall way in which we run our company.
And I know, Angela, from having worked with you, that your Southern roots and the sense of Southern hospitality was not something that you really put front and center when you initially moved out to Hollywood in your early 20s, because you felt that it was actually could be a hindrance to you, right?
I felt like it was definitely a hindrance. I was embarrassed of my accent. I thought that people would think I was stupid. I would say the wrong things sometimes. And of course, when we're in our early 20s, we're very hard on ourselves, right? And we're still hard on ourselves as adults sometimes. But it took me years, many years, to figure out that what I perceived as one of my biggest weaknesses was really one of my biggest strengths. Why not be different? Why try and be someone else? So I think really taking that Southernness, that just happened to be my special sauce, everybody has their own different special sauce, is what really catapulted us into being different, to differentiating our company from all the other production companies that were out there. The fact that, that was my personality, and also that I was a woman, was very different in Hollywood. There weren't a lot of women in charge. So I think those two things, which could have been seen as major setbacks to some people in their career, thankfully I was able to evolve and use that as actually an amazing selling point of what makes us different.
Angela, why do you think that for so many of us, it is challenging because we don't necessarily want to be different, especially if we're younger, but maybe even at any age, we want to fit in, we want to be accepted by other people. And we feel like if we seem so different that we're going to stand out, but maybe not stand out in the way that we want to stand out with them.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I feel, especially as women, we pigeonhole ourselves and we compare ourselves. At no time in our history, probably as humans, is that more true than today with social media and all those things. And I'm grateful that I didn't have that when I was in my early 20s, back in the early 2000s, late 90s. But I think we're at an interesting point, sort of in a society evolutionarily, where we're probably comparing ourselves more on a daily basis, on a minute by minute, hourly basis, looking at our phones all the time, comparing ourselves to other people's careers, other people's bodies, other people's lives, and wanting to fit in that space. But I think also, too, what's different about now than, say, the early 2000s when I was coming up and starting my career is that there's also never been a time in our society where being different is actually cool, where the thing that you might, whether it's the way your hair looks or the style you have or where you came from, especially in the industry we're in entertainment, nothing is so homogenized. People's differences are what makes them unique, what gives them an actual selling point. We see influencers on TikTok and on Instagram. You see people from all walks of life. Now, are they attainable or not? I don't know. But it does go to show, I see commercials all the time featuring people who look different, who come from different backgrounds. So I think in the 20-something year span since, sort of I was coming up, I do feel there is a change, a shift in accepting who you are. And it's something that's hard to do, I think, when you're young and just starting out in your career, but it's a message that can't be amplified enough. It's, take what sets you apart, and that's going to be why people remember you.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking a couple different things, Angela. So first, as you point out with social media, we didn't grow up with social media when we were young, and I'm grateful for that. The flip side of that is, though, I feel like we see so many different types of people that in our quote unquote, mainstream media kind of silos that we grew up with, there were no opportunities to see people who the mainstream media or kind of like the gatekeepers wanted us to see: marketing, advertising, films, TV shows, what have you. And I think of one of the clients you work with, Lizzo, and her body positivity movement. I don't know, 20 years ago, much less earlier than that someone like her would have been able to achieve the level of visibility and exposure and now success that she's had.
Absolutely. And it's a culture shift, which is so exciting to watch. And we definitely still have a long way to go. But Lizzo is particularly inspiring, not just because of the body positivity. That's a big part of her story. But she didn't start out wanting to be a pop star. She was in a marching band. She played the flute. She is just such an interesting person who is, coming. There was a point where she was homeless in her car, I think, for a year or so. As she was really trying to make it, because people they didn't know what to do with her. They didn't know how to market her, but she kind of refused to change. She's like, am I a singer? Am I a rapper? Am I a flautist? What am I? I'm Lizzo, right? So working with her was incredible. And I think she's such a great role model just for young girls everywhere, maybe just to know, no matter what you look like, who you are, what you want to be, it is possible. And I think to see people in that position of power, it holds so much value, even more than we know, because we didn't grow up seeing a lot of that, I don't think. Even her being from Houston, she's not, she came from nothing and really changed her whole life.
I just watched the HBO documentary about Lizzo that recently came out. I just watched it literally a couple of nights ago as of this recording. So I know so much more about her, like you just described, than I had before. So really, she is a really inspiring story because she stayed so authentic and true to herself.
Yes. I feel like in order to be successful at anything you do, whether you want to be a pop star or just maybe be the best, accountant you can be, whatever industry you're in, the best way to truly connect with other people and to connect with your audience, whether that's your coworkers or, your social media following, it's to really be yourself. that's the way you're going to succeed. And you see it all the time with stars, and just the industry I work in. So that's kind of who I relate to. But you see people who try to be someone they're not. And we're also savvy now as consumers and also just as people, that you can tell when people are being disingenuous or they're not really following their truth, as we like to say. So it just feels good. It feels good and it connects with other people. So it's a trend that I've seen over the past 10 years. And I think it's not just something that applies to celebrities. It's really something that can apply to everybody in their daily life.
Absolutely. And Angela, reminds me of the framework that we created for your keynote. And so, we worked together on that, the opening, the closing, everything in between. And we came up with this acronym ACT, ACT. And so it's accept who you are, like accept that uniqueness about you. And then the C is for create your own narrative. So decide, like, what do you want to put out there, just like Lizzo did. And then the T is to tell your story, which of course, that's what we do here at Speaking Your Brand. So Angela, can you tell us a little bit about, for yourself, you mentioned moving to Hollywood when you're relatively young and feeling like, you wanted to fit in because obviously you want to be accepted, but then realizing that these uniquenesses about you being a woman and also being from the South was a way that you could stand out and actually could attract great clients, like the kind of clients you would love to work with. And I remember that part of your talk, there was another element though of your identity that you resisted for a long time until just about a year or so ago, that changed.
Yes, it's another narrative that I think as women specifically, we tell ourselves is, could I be a good mom and also be a business owner? And I'd accepted so many things about myself, my Southernness, my womanhood, my abilities to be in business as that person with those experiences. But I had this loop in my head, and I'm sure this is something that a lot of other women feel. How can I do it all? Is it possible to do it all? And so I really struggled with figuring out how to let that part of me blossom, really. But it really did, because I had a kid a year and a half ago. I have a 16-month-old son. But it was incredible to me as this sort of power woman, businesswoman, that I was still questioning myself. And sometimes I would think about it like, okay, I'm playing this tape in my head and I know that I can do it. But it's hard for a lot of women because we're kind of told by society, I think, that we can't have it all, or that you can only be good at one thing. And trust me, there's a lot of days where I'm not feeling like I'm succeeding at either, but I think that that's just normal. But I do know that, like a lot of things in life, sometimes you just have to do it, and you have to have a supportive partner and a great support system, whatever that looks like for you. But it was an incredible realization the day that I realized, okay, well, it doesn't matter who I hire to replace me in business, who I try to be me, there's nobody that's going to be me. So how about I just be myself as a badass business owner, a badass mom, a great example for my kid, and the rest is history. Here he is in the world, and we're thriving. So,
and I think this is why I asked you about this. I wanted you to share it here, but then also in your keynote, because I do feel like for so many women out there, is sharing these thoughts, these limiting beliefs, these things that we have, especially from successful people, someone like you, Angela. You have this incredible production company. You work with all these well-known brands and people. You're Emmy award winning. Yeah, we all have those doubts and insecurities, and we're not sure. And so you sharing that helps others to feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this as well.
Absolutely. And it's only through that. And I think that's sort of one of the secret powers of women, is so many times we don't share because we're, again, comparing ourselves to others. We see Supermom on Instagram making dinner and doing her TikToks, and her kids are perfectly dressed and everybody's great. Well, I've now been on the other side of that, and I know what it takes to get my kid into that perfect little outfit when, oh, whoops, before the picture is taken, he spills all over himself, and it's actually an hour-long ordeal. So, just like in Hollywood, where it takes a long time to set the scene, it's not always as pictured. And I think the more that we start sharing that, hey, my life is not picture perfect. And I don't think anybody's is. And if they're telling you that, they're probably not telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly. That is, I living a human life is there are challenges. That's how we learn and grow.
Absolutely.
All right, and Angela. Well, speaking of challenges, as I teed up in the intro, obviously, our economy, kind of the marketplace, is going through a shift right now. When the pandemic started in March 2020, that was a huge shock to the economy, and I feel like there were definitely a segment of the population who experienced a lot of lost jobs or what have you. And I feel like for a lot of the entrepreneurs that I know, actually the pandemic had a silver lining, as long as everyone was healthy, in the sense that it allowed us to have some extra time to focus on our business, to really understand our clientele, to really put out great content. And I know, like, speaking your brand, our business really thrived over the past 2 years, but I'm definitely feeling a shift in the marketplace now, understandably so. There's so much going on. And Angela, you may be feeling this too, but I know, because you've been in business a long time, not only did you go through the pandemic in 2020, but you actually went through what's called the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2000, however long that lasted. What did you find was effective for you in these different, changes that you're taking with you now?
Yeah, it's such an interesting time, Carol, and just talking to other business owners and even, people that are on my team who haven't maybe had as much experience as some of us veterans. I guess now I'm a industry veteran, which is kind of weird. But, when you've been in business long enough, you start seeing these cycles. It's all cyclical, right? And I think one thing that I really learned, especially through the pandemic, because we really did survive and thrive, thankfully during the pandemic, is your customers, your clients, whoever that might be, are going to be looking for solutions to their problem. I like to give this advice to all the business owners that I work with and that I know that are in my circle is, we have to just start thinking about solutions, right? Don't go to the clients asking for more business. Go to them asking, what can we do to help you? And whether that's your client or your customer or whatever kind of business you're in, at these times, people want to see that you can help them. And during the pandemic, specifically, our clients weren't able to film anything because everything was shut down. There wasn't any filming. And I was, of course, very concerned because my job is usually being on set with at least 100 people. So when it was like, okay, we can't shoot anything, we came up with a solution for remote filming, which is completely contactless. When I think about how we did it, it just amazes me. And so we were able to not only stay busy, but we were able to stay at the forefront of the client's top of mind. So that when filming came back, we were top of mind and stayed really busy and had even more business than before the pandemic, which was incredible. So I think as women, especially, not that men can't do this too, but I think as women, we're very intuitive. We excel at reading the room. So in these times of uncertainty and crisis, I think we have to trust our guts and say, okay, intuitively, I'm a nurturer. So what can I do to help take care of whoever my client or my customer is? What's gonna make them trust me and know that I will help them? So I feel like that's a good place, a little nugget of what kind of kept us going through and not only surviving, but thriving during the pandemic. And I think it's also something that just in times of uncertainty really can help get you through these sort of interesting times. Because we've been in business for 17 years and you never know what it might be. I mean, in the entertainment business, we've seen such a seismic shift between, networks and then cable and now streaming. So it's just, well, no matter what business you're in, it's evolving and it's evolving right now. And if you don't know it's evolving, it is, and you should find out how.
Yeah, it is true. And the cycles seem to be coming faster and faster, and the needing to evolve is faster and faster. Because I imagine 20, 30, 40 years ago, of course, businesses had to evolve, but not at the same rate that we have to nowadays.
Exactly. Technology changes, and depending on what sector you're in, it doesn't matter. We're all connected in this sort of fast-paced world, right? So it is evolving at a very rapid rate, and there are a lot of unknowns. But I think to me, trusting your gut and using your intuition has always been the best course of action for me as a business owner. Sometimes you're not always right, but it leads you down maybe even a different path that you didn't know was possible. But I think that there are ways to turn what, again, going back to my talk, turning what could be a perceived, weak economy, and how do you turn that into a positive? Because I think it's really about how you spin it, right? Clearly, I'm an eternal optimist, but how do you take something that you think might be a bad thing and spin it into something that could be really positive?
Yeah. And I love your approach, Angela, with your clients or prospective clients, is how can we help you? What is it that you are needing right now? And because, and not just assuming that whatever your solution was or product or service was that worked 6 months ago or a year ago, it may be a great product, service, solution, whatever it happens to be. And it may have worked really well at the time, but it may not be the right fit for where people are today.
Exactly. And I think one of the best, speaking your brand, it fits perfectly with this, is speak to your clients, talk to them. What are you looking for? What is keeping you up at night? We sell products, we sell TV shows. That's what we do. So, what are our audiences looking for? Your clients, your customers, you have to approach it in the same way. So I think it's really about observing and listening, and then acting out of, and it goes back to the sincerity, acting from a place of, obviously you want something beneficial for yourself, but you also want to make sure that you're serving a purpose too.
And this is where your relationships and your network will come in to play so strongly. And I know, Angela, we actually met through Colleen O'Mara and Jesse Nagel, who are the founders of a PR and a social media agency out in Los Angeles called Hype. And Colleen and Jesse went through our Thought Leader Academy earlier this year. They were on the podcast in August, episode 292, on your net worth is in your network, because they are amazing at building their network, but truly from a place of service and an authentic connection and deep connection, not just, I'm going to go put a bunch of people in my, whatever the Rolodex is nowadays, in my phone contacts and in my email list. And so, Angela, I assume that because you also have been in Hollywood for over 2 decades now, that you have a lot of really deep relationships with people, that whether it's the pandemic in 2020 or the changes in the economy now, are going to serve you.
Absolutely. And when I mentor young people, or when I talk to young people, or the young people in my team, I really stress that point of networking, really building authentic, amazing relationships with other people, because it has served me throughout my entire career, whether it's someone helping me out or I'm able to help them out. It's really building these friendships. And what's great about sort of being a woman in business is there's so many people that are just willing to help you. It truly does take a village to start a business and to keep thriving. And I know that I had the women and a few men, but mostly women, to be honest, who supported me as a 26-year-old young girl who was, just launching a company. You need that support, right? And they might need you someday. So it's been interesting during the pandemic, because a lot of the young people coming into their careers didn't have a lot of opportunities, right? There weren't mixers, there weren't conferences. So I think there's a whole generation of the early 20-somethings that have kind of missed out on not being in a workplace and not having those connections. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, as we're hopefully coming out of the pandemic, teaching that to the next generation of how important that is, because I really truly believe it's been difficult. I went to a industry mixer, and there was a lot of young 20-somethings there, and it was the first thing they had ever been to. And business cards are also obsolete. I don't know if you knew that, but maybe that happened before the pandemic.
I feel like it probably did happen before the pandemic, but we held on to them. So what are the youngins using nowadays?
It was so bizarre, Carol. It was a little interesting, because I hadn't been to a networking event since COVID. So it had probably been about 2 years almost. And the kids these days, they swap Instagram handles or LinkedIn. If it was me and another middle-aged person, we're just emailing each other on the spot, which is difficult if you have a glass of wine and your phone and there has to be a better way. So if you could do a podcast with someone on the new rule, the post-pandemic rules of networking. I think that would be really
Yeah, that's a great idea. Well, I have heard of these things called dot cards, DOT. Yes.
Yes, the dot card.
And so they have like a QR code on them. And then obviously you put all your information on there. So it can automatically, when someone scans it, add you to their iPhone contacts, go to LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever you want it to do. So that I think is the new thing.
I think is the new thing. But, if I went to an event, I would come home with the business cards in my pocket and I would know exactly who to follow up with. When you have the pods thing, you really just have to have the mental Rolodex. It's just different. And I was never a fan of business cards to begin with anyway. You lost them. They were just annoying, but it's a brave new world out there. And I do think it's important for the younger generation to really establish that network and establish kind of their tribe, because it is so important. But I would be really interested in seeing a podcast about the new networking rules, because I need a little brush up.
All right. So for those of you listening, if you feel like you would make a great guest to talk about that, please contact me and let me know. Or if you know someone who would make a great guest, please send them my way and let them know you listened to this episode and that you have someone in mind, because I think that's a great idea. And speaking of LinkedIn and Instagram, I'll make sure that Angela's links to connect with her on LinkedIn and Instagram are in the show notes. So make sure to do that and say hi to her as well. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Angela, thank you so much for coming on the Speaking Your Brand podcast. You are an inspiration. I really have enjoyed getting to know you.
Carol, thanks so much for having me. You're just amazing. You're part therapist, part speaking coach, just overall general fabulous person. So thank you so much for having me on.